strange and bizarre language where not every lexical word is stressed, and it's called French. Perhaps you heard about that language. Anyway, the talk is about accent phrases, as everybody knows, I think. An accent phrase is defined by almost all schools by a sequence of words with only one non-emphatic stressed syllable. So in English, Italian, or Greek, and so on, that is lexically-stressed language, that's what they're called. Accent phrases contain necessarily one verb, noun, adjective, or adverb, because those categories have a stressed syllable normally. But in non-lexically stressed language, like I quoted French, but Korean, Saka, or the language have something else. They don't have that. They don't have a rule that tells the verb or noun adjective should be stressed somewhere. It's just the fact that the final syllable of the last word in the accent phrase bear the stress. So it looks like strange or bizarre, and when you view the consequences of that, it becomes really scaring, perhaps, for phoneticians, if not for phonologists. So, okay, for instance, in French, it's true that a lot of the so-called lexical words are stressed on their last syllables, but there are a lot of cases where it's not the case. For instance, if you say donne-le-moi, give it to me, or et pour ce qui est du problème, and actually, haha, for English, okay, how come you stress and? So maybe the autosegmental grammatical people were perhaps obsessed by the written representation of data. I don't know. Anyway, and that's more intriguing. The segmentation of accent phrases, so the fact that you stressed one syllable somewhere, does not depend on the number of syllables, as it was proposed actually in the 16th century, but it depends on the time you take to pronounce them. So in other words, if you speak fast, you can say la ville de Paris. If you speak slowly, you say la ville de Paris. So the segmentation, the phrasing into this example is different. In the first case, on the left, fast speech, you get one large accent phrase, whereas when you speak slowly, you get two. Okay, now there are other fact that should be mentioned about these accent phrases, which are not depending on the category of the words inside. For instance, but that works in English too, or even in Greek, you have to separate in a stress clash situation, you have to separate the two stress syllables by at least a quarter of a second, 250 milliseconds. So that's a strange example. Le travail de nuit, working at night is not good for you. If you don't maintain this 256 millisecond interval, although if you keep the same acoustical feature, the same duration, the same change in phenomenal frequency and so on, and if you, with the computer, reduce the gap between the two consecutive stress syllables, the first one, no, the second one, sorry, no, the first one stops to be perceived as stressed. Okay. Now, how about the other interval, 1250 milliseconds? That's easy to see, to observe. If you take an example, la petite bouteille verte, it's almost, no, it's not almost, it is impossible not to put a secondary stress, let's say, on another final syllable of some other word, like a petite bouteille vert olive. Now, if you use one word, sorry, if you consider a very long word with a lot of syllables, like for Greek people, it's very easy to understand what it means, but for French, it's more difficult. La parascévie des quatriaphobies, you have to stress another syllables than the final one. Okay, so some other observation. Any final syllable in French, followed by more than 250 milliseconds of silence, is perceived as stressed. whatever their acoustic properties, this final syllable can be have a shorter duration than the preceding ones, or have no change or significant change in phonemic frequency, or no special intensity, large intensity. Still, it's perceived as stress. Okay. Now, that's just the last paragraph here. Just an observation. The average accent phrase duration is about 500, 600 milliseconds, which correspond to 4 to 5 syllables. That's an average, of course. So when you look at spontaneous speech, you notice that speakers have a tendency to be eurythmic. It means that they try, they don't succeed, of course, all the time exactly, but they try to have a successive duration accent phrases of similar duration. And there is an explanation for that, but that's not the point I want to mention here. Okay, so what's the problem with that, with all these observations and the fact that French is not a lexically stressed language? Well, if the placement of an accent phrase, of the accent phrase stress syllable depends on the speech rate, what's the rule? Okay, so if you read aloud a text, a written text, if you read it aloud, or if you read it in your head silently, it's the same effect, except that when you read silently, you can go much faster than when you do it orally, of course. But still, you notice that the phrasing, the segmentation of your text, of your speech into accent phrases depends on the speech rate. Okay, so the other point is the perception from expectation. So when you listen to speech, and this is addressed to annotators, you anticipate, of course, all the time. It's not especially devoted to stress. You anticipate a few syllables to a few words when you listen to somebody, right? Okay. When you read somebody, of course, you know what's going to happen later on time, in the time axis. But if you do that, it's already, it applies as well to stress syllable. So when you listen to a corpus, for instance, of oral speech, and you say, okay, I have to annotate the stress syllables, well, it's a nightmare, actually. So there are two, I'm quoting two studies that were very carefully done by Avanzi and Simon, especially those two ones. They worked on a single page read by speakers, different speakers, during one full month. I couldn't agree for more than 85% on the position of stress syllables. So they disagree. Some were perceiving a stress where the other one was not, and conversely. Okay, so it's annoying, but so annotation of stress syllables and segmentation to accent phrase, which is a consequence of that, depends in part of the usual annotator listening or reading speak. So second consequence, we cannot rely really, or not completely, on the traditional phonetic approach, trying to characterize syllabic stress by a combination of acoustic features as the very well-known vowel duration, intensity, and pitch range. Still, there are some secure things that we can keep for us, is that fundamental frequency on, but just on, the vowel of the stressed syllables, which vary above the glissando level, are always perceived as stressed. What does it mean? Glissando levels, it's just a level above which you perceive a change in frequency, in fundamental frequency, in pitch, if you like. When it's below the glissando level, you perceive a static tone. That's why I'm always puzzled or even annoyed with the Toby representation, because they don't consider this. Is it perceived or not perceived? It just transcribes something you see on the screen displayed by Pratt or something else. Okay, so why is it important? Well, most sentence intonation models, they rely on the concept of accent phrase. The prosodic structure is usually defined as a structure, a hierarchical organization of accent phrases. So, of course, if you do that for French or Korean or something, another non-lexically stressed language, you have to rely on the position of these stressed syllables. You have to rely on the segmentation into accent phrases. So how can we do that? Can we make a machine, build a machine to do that? So you see immediately the problem is that, okay, so the idea is to integrate all these preparations that I mentioned quickly into an algorithm for automatic detection of accent phrases in French. But there is a catch, of course, is that since you cannot rely on human annotators, how are you going to evaluate the functioning of your algorithm to do automatic stress annotation? So you have to reconsider the role, the function of such a program, a computer program. It's more that a simulator of stress annotation, and practically, because it has been applied to very long hours, 2 hours or 3 hours of spontaneous speech. It's just some tool that attracts attention of the annotators of potential problems. And let's see an example here. Oh, by the way, I just a list, I won't read that for you, just a list of all the parameters and facts that are integrated into the program. So that's a simple read sentence. I think you can play.
Il était une fois un pauvre escargot qui souffrait beaucoup à chaque fois qu'il partait en randonnée.
You see it's relatively fast speech rate. No, so the program, oh, it's not Pratt, you notice that, it's wind pitch, I didn't mention that. And wind pitch aligns automatically from the text you see below, il était une fois un pauvre escargot, align it and segment it into phones and gives you the API transcription automatically. By the way, it works for 42 languages, including Greek. So if you want to try it. So the next step is to...
Un pauvre escargot qui souffrait beaucoup à chaque fois qu'il partait en randonnée.
So you heard it twice. So the system start with one of the possible feature that we can apply, the fact that lexical word may carry a final stress on the final syllable. But it's not always the case, and it's not the case for a fast speech rate when there's no stress there, because there's another word that carries the stress, which is can be grammatical or lexical. Okay, so the system, the program highlights automatically from starting from this segmentation, automatically the possible candidates to be stressed, the stressable syllables. And you see, this comes from the eurythmic criteria. This is above the glissando value. It's supposed to be perceived as a change in frequency, that 1, 2, this is your eurythmic, and so on. So you have that, then you have something to check if it is a violation of your basic rules, minus a quarter of a second or more than 12 and 50 milliseconds. And you get this, you have to say, okay, that's an emphatic stress because this distance is too short. By the way, I went very quickly, but it's really astonishing that if you manipulate a sentence so that some stressed syllable does not maintain the acoustic feature of that stress, people still hear it, they perceive it, because they expect the stress to be somewhere in a very long, long, which is 1250 milliseconds, about that value. They expect that something must be there, so they hear it, they're certain. And conversely, sometimes they're totally deaf, although there is a strong, you have a lot of features that tell you it should be stressed. So, okay, and once you do that, but that's more about prosodic structure. In WinPitch, you can, one click, you can apply, actually you get that automatically, and you can apply some easy rules to define a prosodic structure, which appears here.
Il était une fois un pauvre escargot qui souffrait beaucoup à chaque fois qu'il partait en randonnée.
By the way, this is a flattening Professor Bottini spoke about, and Marco too. Okay, so the conclusion is mission impossible. Sorry, isn't that sad? I'm finished. Athena, still there?
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I thought you had one more. Sorry. Okay. So, for any questions? Yes, Professor Bottinis.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Philippe. Today, I did enjoy you and understood more than every other time. Well,
it's progress.
Yes. If your approach faces reliably several tests, it's just brilliant. Let's start from the very beginning. If we have a written text in French, we cannot segment in accent phrases because it depends on the velocity of the speaker, right?
No, yeah, you mean there are different ways to segment, okay.
Okay. One question, because I have several. One question is that, is it those accent phrases, do they have both acoustic and perceptual correlates?
No.
Or are they some semi-abstract units?
No, some have acoustic feature which correspond to the perception, okay? Especially the ones, the terminal contour, the one that carries modality in French and so on, as well as the, it can refer to the old terminology of continuation majeure, from the Latin, but it's not the same thing, but it's close. The idea is close from that. And then you have a change in pitch, which is it's quite above the so-called glissando threshold, from Rossi. He established that a long time ago. Okay, and others too, but hard to. So there's no problem for those most of the time. But there are a lot of other stressed syllables in French which carry something, I shouldn't say really flat fundamental frequency, or they don't have especially a longer duration of inside this accent phrase, but they are still perceived, anyway, produced or perceived by French speakers without, that's why, people who don't know French hear people speaking French say, oh, French, there's no stress in French. Of course there is, but the realization acoustic is not as clear as in English or something, but still it's there. And as you know, I'm working on brain waves, and there's this special delta oscillation, which apparently, and more than apparently, trying to really prove it seriously, is synchronizing the segmentation, the phrasing of speech, including in silent reading or silent speech. You can speak to yourself as well, and you hear your voice, and you have to put your stress. And the other intriguing fact that you cannot read in English or any language, you cannot read a text without having, silently, without perceiving in your head, let's say, quote unquote, a speech, actually, speech with carry stressed syllables. And you cannot get out of that. You cannot avoid it. And there's no muscular or phonation involved in it. There you perceive stress that literally does not exist because it is silent reading.
Well, Athena, if there is nobody else who has raised hand, I would like to ask something
Yes,
more.
yes, you can, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, Philippe,
Yes.
now you have your accent phrases, whatever the definition. What about Rossis and others, continuation mineure and continuation majeure and all this? Is it the tree you show us? Is it representative?
It's a first draft, let's say, of what I think, but I came before him. But my first paper on that was published in 1975, and okay, and only perhaps Lisa Selkirk saw it. I don't know. Yeah, I know what she did, and things like that. But nothing came out, and really, perhaps because it was on French. I don't know. But then. Where is it? Okay. For instance, if you look at this, you can see the screen still, yeah?
Yes.
You see, this blue is a continuation majeure, if you like.
Yes.
It's different from Rossi and so on, just in the fact that it's...
Oh, no, I mean the terminological.
Okay. Okay, in that case, you see the main system, the main feature of, let's say, prosodic grammar in French is this contrast in melodic slope. You see, it's rising here, and the fact that you have a contour on the stressed vowel, I should say, above the glissando threshold, so people hear it as a change, it goes down, okay, indicates that this forms a larger prosodic group. This is an accent, this is something else, okay. This is an accent phrase, that's another accent phrase, and this one plus this one makes a larger, let's say, an intonation syntax, if you like, and so on. So you have a grammar like that. And believe it or not, it was applied on red speech, spontaneous speech, on, I don't know, Emmanuel Macron.
But I see
it works.
I see a little bit red, a little bit black here, somewhat on the left. If I remember well, you said it was some focus there, some emphasis, right?
Oh, this one, yeah.
Well,
it's okay.
Emphasis.
It's you
what about accent d'insistance? I mean, you say we can hear many years ago. I don't now listen to the French radio. Le président de la République, le président, just at the beginning.
Yes,
it's a focal.
No, it's phonologically different just because it's located on the first syllable of a content word. And more than that, I know that the autosegmental metrical account of French is always say there is a HI, I think that's a symbol on the first syllable. It's not true. It's a legend. They do that on TV, French TV. Yes. But or when you do a class or something. But usually, when people speak normally, they don't. Ils n'insistent pas comme ça. No.
But Philippe, it's curious that this type, it's news, it's television news. In they started first in France, and then you can hear in the English-speaking world, and even in Sweden, and even in Greece. In Greece, the prime minister is Πρωθυπουργός, as you might know. They say o Πρωθυπουργός της Ελλάδος, which means we change subject and we will emphasize it's a new thing, a new discourse element, and the prime minister is very important. O Πρωθυπουργός, le président de la République.
Yeah, but I listen carefully. I analyze a lot of speech from the news and TV news, and I don't do that much. It's exceptional. It's a legend. I believe it was like that before too. So I analyze hours and hours of the speech from Macron, from the president, from Sarkozy, and so they don't do that. In a whole discourse, Sarkozy is only one stress syllable emphatic on the first syllable of a content word. Only one.
Thank you very much indeed, Philippe.
But you know, the legend is
It's
strong.
a pleasure. It's a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.